Welcome back to Revise and Resubmit, the show where we break down the latest and greatest in academic research. I'm Pavlov.
And I'm Nikita. We're going to be looking at a collection of articles today from Harvard Business Publishing's Inspiring Minds. And we're going to be exploring how to keep dialogue open and respectful, even when, things get a little heated. Think about like those times when you want to speak up, but you hesitate, or when a conversation just goes totally off the rails. We'll be looking at some strategies for those very situations.
Yeah, what's great about this collection is it really highlights the power of thoughtful communication in a variety of settings, from classrooms to, boardrooms to even like your own dinner table.
That's a great point. Yeah, we've got articles on like everything from setting the stage for these conversations to embracing those morally charged topics that can sometimes make people just clam up. We even have one on bringing political conversations into the classroom, which I'm super curious to unpack.
Yeah, and I think what's really interesting is even though these articles are geared towards educators, I think the insights are really valuable for anyone who just wants to, improve their communication skills.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's dive in. The first article, Setting the Stage for Challenging Conversations, by Alexandra Sedlovskaya, introduces this 4 C's framework: curiosity, candor, courtesy, and courage. Have you ever heard of this before?
I have, yeah. It's a pretty simple but powerful framework for creating a space where everyone feels safe to share their thoughts and perspectives.
Yeah.
And so, instead of diving headfirst into a potentially controversial subject, Sedlovskaya really emphasizes the importance of building trust beforehand.
That makes a lot of sense. You can't really expect people to open up if they feel judged or attacked, right? So how do you actually go about building that trust?
Well, Sedlovskaya suggests reaching out to people even before a formal meeting or class starts and just making those personal connections early on. It's like laying the groundwork for, a strong foundation.
Oh, so like sending a quick email to your team before like a big brainstorming session just to connect on that human level.
Exactly. It helps to create that sense of camaraderie and, psychological safety.
I like that. And each of the C's plays a role in kind of fostering that open dialogue, right?
Absolutely. So starting with curiosity, it isn't just about, being interested in the topic at hand, but being genuinely interested in hearing diverse perspectives, even those you might initially disagree with.
So not about searching for like the quote unquote right answer, but like being open to those, unexpected viewpoints.
Right. And then candor's about being vulnerable yourself.
Yeah.
You can't expect others to be open and honest if you're not willing to do the same. So think of it as setting the tone by sharing your own experiences or admitting when you don't have all the answers.
And courtesy, I imagine, is all about ensuring everyone feels respected even during disagreements.
Precisely. It's about making it clear that everyone is operating from a place of good intentions, even when they hold different views.
I like that. Now, Sedlovskaya also talks about those common barriers to open dialogue, like the fear of judgment or that pluralistic ignorance thing, where people stay silent because they think they're the only one with a certain view.
Yeah, it's like that feeling of being in a meeting and assuming everyone agrees because no one's speaking up, even though, many might be feeling the same way.
Oh, that's so true. I've definitely experienced that. And she reminds us that discomfort is where learning often happens, and that avoiding difficult discussions can actually be more harmful than having them. So how do we, make those uncomfortable conversations more productive and less uncomfortable?
Well, that's where this idea of encouraging respectful discord comes in. And it might sound a bit paradoxical, but conflict can actually be a natural part of learning. The next article by Mara Levinson, George Soroka, and Christina V. Villarreal dives into this idea.
So it's not about everyone agreeing all the time. It's about learning to engage with different viewpoints, even those that might challenge our own deeply held beliefs.
Exactly. And to make that happen, they suggest setting ground rules from the get-go, like making it clear that personal attacks are off limits, that what's shared stays within the group. It's about creating an environment where people feel safe to express themselves without fear of repercussions.
That sense of psychological safety is so crucial.
It is, and it goes beyond just setting rules. It's about fostering a culture of empathy.
So how do we create that empathy?
Well, Levinson and her colleagues emphasize the importance of encouraging people to examine their own backgrounds and biases. We all come to the table with our own unique experiences and perspectives, and recognizing that is really key to building empathy.
I've noticed that even small wording choices can make such a big difference in how people perceive a message. Like saying undocumented immigrant versus illegal immigrant. One feels more humanizing while the other feels dehumanizing.
You're absolutely right. And actually, George Soroka talks about that. How even seemingly small choices in wording can actually encode certain values and biases. So being mindful of the language we use can really help ensure that everyone feels heard and respected.
So it's about being deliberate with our words and understanding those subtle ways that language can impact a conversation.
That's a great point.
And then there are techniques for diving into hard conversations without shutting them down, like assigning people specific positions to argue, even if they don't personally agree with those positions.
Yes, and Soroka explains that, that allows people to engage with challenging ideas from a different perspective without feeling like they're compromising their own values.
Yeah.
It's a way to step into someone else's shoes, so to speak.
I can see how that would be incredibly valuable, not just in a classroom setting, but in any situation where you need to understand a different point of view.
Absolutely. Another technique they suggest is discussing complex cases without clear-cut solutions.
That sounds interesting. How does that work?
So Levinson uses these things called normative case studies. They're basically real-world ethical dilemmas that don't have easy answers.
So instead of trying to find the right solution, you're forced to grapple with the nuances and complexities of the issue.
Exactly. And that process of grappling with complexity is where the real learning happens.
That makes a lot of sense. I'm also curious about those moments when a conversation starts to go off the rails. What are some ways to kind of bring it back on track?
Well, that's something that Soroka and his colleagues address as well. Sometimes the best thing to do is just pause. Gather your thoughts. Encourage everyone to take a breath. It's about creating space for people to calm down and process what's been said before things escalate further.
I love that, especially in the heat of the moment. It's so easy to react emotionally and say something you regret later. So pausing allows everyone to kind of recenter and refocus on the goal of the conversation.
It does. They also emphasize responding to challenging comments with curiosity rather than judgment. So instead of shutting someone down, try asking clarifying questions, acknowledge their perspective, and, encourage them to take risks in sharing your thoughts.
That sounds so much more constructive than immediately getting defensive or trying to, win the argument.
It is. Sometimes you might need to schedule a follow-up conversation, especially if the issue is too complex to unpack in the moment. Having that one-on-one in a neutral setting can create a much safer and more equitable space for dialogue.
That's a great tip. It allows for deeper engagement and a more thoughtful exploration of the topic.
It does. Now, shifting gears a bit, how do we approach those topics that are inherently morally charged? The ones that people often avoid altogether because they're afraid of saying the wrong thing.
Yeah, I'm thinking about those conversations around things like diversity and inclusion or a company's responsibility to the environment.
Exactly. Those are the conversations that G. James Lemoyne tackles in his article, Embrace, Don't Avoid Morally Controversial Topics in Class. He argues that these are precisely the conversations we should be having, especially in a business context.
It's like he's saying that the modern world is full of ethical dilemmas, and avoiding those conversations actually does a disservice to everyone involved.
He's right. And he uses those examples you mentioned, like navigating differing visions for diversity, equity, and inclusion, or determining a company's obligations to environmental sustainability. These aren't easy topics, but they're ones we can't shy away from.
He even brings up that question of whether a company should ever take a political position. That's a hot-button issue for sure.
It is. But these are the types of conversations people will inevitably face in their careers, and it's crucial to equip them with the tools to navigate them thoughtfully and ethically.
So how do we even begin to have these conversations in a productive way? Lemoyne offers some tips, right?
Yes. One of the most important things he emphasizes is setting ground rules early on. Let everyone know from the beginning that controversial topics will be discussed and that respectful disagreement is not only welcome, but encouraged.
So it's about establishing that expectation of open dialogue right from the start.
Exactly. He also stresses that respecting other opinions doesn't require abandoning one's own. It's not about forcing everyone to agree. It's about fostering understanding and encouraging engagement with different viewpoints.
I like that it's about recognizing that we can hold differing views without resorting to personal attacks or shutting down the conversation.
Precisely. And he suggests using anonymous polling to gauge opinions and initiate risk-free discussion. This can be a great way to get a sense of where everyone stands on a particular issue without putting anyone on the spot.
That's a clever technique. It allows people to share their thoughts without feeling pressured to conform or say what they think others want to hear.
Exactly. And it can lead to some really insightful discussions. Another key point Lemoyne makes is that respectful disagreement is actually a sign of engagement and critical thought.
Yeah.
Which is incredibly valuable in any setting, whether it's a classroom, a workplace, or even just a casual conversation with friends.
So instead of viewing disagreement as something negative, we should see it as an opportunity for growth and learning.
Absolutely. And he reminds us that the facilitator or leader's opinion isn't necessarily the right one. Their role isn't to indoctrinate others, but to help them develop their own informed opinions.
I think that's so important. It's about empowering people to think critically and draw their own conclusions, not forcing our own views on them.
Exactly. And finally, Lemoyne suggests encouraging people to think through moral arguments from both sides, even those they disagree with. This is how we develop a deeper understanding of an issue and strengthen our own persuasive abilities.
Yeah, I've noticed that when I can articulate the opposing view in a way that even its proponents would agree with, it shows that I've really engaged with the issue from all angles.
Right. He even shares an anecdote about students thanking him for teaching them this skill and using it outside the classroom. It just shows the real-world value of engaging with opposing viewpoints.
It's about broadening our perspectives and recognizing that intelligent, well-intentioned people can hold differing views on complex moral issues.
Absolutely.
So far, we've covered setting the stage for challenging conversations and embracing those morally charged topics. But how do we bring this all into the real world, especially in our current climate of increasing political polarization?
That's a great question, and it's precisely what the next article addresses. Ready to explore that.
Okay, so let's talk about how we handle those conversations where politics just inevitably comes up. It feels like everything is politically charged these days, and it can be so tough to know how to engage without things getting out of hand.
It's a delicate balance for sure. Rebecca Yunmi Haslam tackles this head-on in her article, "The World is Politically Charged. Bring those conversations into the classroom." And she actually challenges the idea of staying completely neutral, especially in educational settings.
So she's not saying, like, pick a side and preach it, but rather that pretending politics doesn't exist is doing a disservice.
Exactly. Haslam argues that, it's about preparing people to engage thoughtfully with the real world, where these issues are just unavoidable. I mean, think about it. Politics influences so much of our lives, from healthcare to the economy to the environment.
Yeah, it's true. You can't really escape it. And I do see the danger in pretending those influences don't exist, like we're somehow above it all.
Right. Haslam makes this compelling point that staying neutral isn't always a natural or even helpful response to issues that, deeply impact us. She emphasizes the importance of civic engagement as a part of learning and growth.
So how do we bring these conversations into the classroom or even the workplace in a way that's productive and not just a shouting match?
Well, Haslam offers 4 strategies for facilitating these types of conversations. And the first one that really stood out to me is being authentic. It's about acknowledging what you don't know and modeling a learning mindset.
That resonates with me, going back to that idea of vulnerability we talked about earlier. It creates a space where it's okay to admit you don't have all the answers and to be open to learning from others.
Exactly. And she provides some helpful response prompts for engaging with sensitive topics covering the intellectual, moral, emotional, and relational aspects.
So not just sticking to like dry facts and figures, but acknowledging that these conversations also involve values, emotions, and personal experiences.
Precisely. These prompts encourage people to, move beyond those surface level opinions and really delve into the complexities of an issue. For example, instead of simply asking, "Do you agree with this policy?" you might ask, "How does this policy make you feel?" Or what values are at play in this debate?
Those are such great questions. They invite deeper reflection and encourage people to consider, different perspectives.
They do. Haslam also encourages educators to talk openly about power dynamics and their influence on access and opportunity. This is something that's often left unsaid, but it's so important to understand how power structures shape our lives and the world around us.
Yeah, it's true. We don't always acknowledge those invisible forces that are at play. I can see how understanding power dynamics would be so helpful in navigating those politically charged conversations.
Absolutely. It helps us develop, a critical lens through which to view the world, recognizing how our own identities and experiences position us within those power structures.
It's about understanding where we stand in relation to others and how that influences our perspectives. That's powerful stuff.
It is. And Haslam emphasizes showing people that their opinions matter, even when they might hold a minority viewpoint. This can be done through simple things like regularly soliciting feedback and demonstrating that you're listening and taking their thoughts into consideration.
So making people feel heard and valued, even if you don't agree with everything they say.
Exactly. It's about creating a space where everyone feels safe to contribute to the conversation.
And her final strategy is to make discussions relevant by connecting them to current events and news. It's about bridging that gap between theory and practice, showing how these concepts actually play out in the real world.
I love that. Instead of just talking about abstract ideas, it's about grounding those ideas in real-world examples. It makes the learning process so much more engaging and meaningful.
It does, and it helps people see how these concepts are relevant to their own lives. So bringing politics into the classroom, or any setting for that matter, isn't about pushing a particular agenda or forcing people to adopt specific viewpoints.
It's about equipping them with the skills and knowledge to engage thoughtfully and constructively in these conversations, which is essential for informed and engaged citizens.
I love that. It's about fostering critical thinking and respectful dialogue, even when the topic is politically charged. It's like we've come full circle back to that idea of respectful discord being a valuable part of the learning process.
You got it. So now we've talked about setting the stage, encouraging respectful discord, embracing morally charged topics, and bringing political conversations into the mix. But what about those moments when things get really uncomfortable, even with all the best intentions? How do we handle those situations where tensions rise and emotions run high?
Yeah, I'm thinking about those times when someone says something offensive, or when a disagreement turns personal. It can be really tough to know how to respond in those moments.
You're right, those situations can be challenging. But luckily, the final article in this collection offers some really practical advice for navigating those tricky moments. Alexandra Sidlovskaya, who we discussed earlier, returns with an insightful piece titled How to Lead Uncomfortable Class Discussions.
Oh, okay, so she's building on that 4Cs framework we talked about.
Exactly. She offers additional tips and strategies specifically for those moments when things get heated. One of the things she emphasizes is the importance of reminding everyone of those established norms, especially at the beginning of each session. And even more so when you know the topic is sensitive. It's about setting that foundation of respect and creating a safe space for dialogue, even when, the conversation might get difficult.
Right.
And she reminds us that, challenging moments are actually learning opportunities. Approaching them with a mindset of curiosity and growth can be incredibly powerful.
So instead of seeing those moments as something to fear or avoid, we can reframe them as opportunities for deeper understanding.
That's a great way to put it. She also provides some specific prompts for navigating those tricky moments. For example, she suggests acknowledging the importance of vulnerability and creating a space where people feel safe to express themselves without fear of judgment.
Yeah, that's so important, especially when you're dealing with sensitive topics that might be deeply personal for some people.
It is. It's about ensuring that everyone feels heard and respected, even when they're expressing views that might be controversial or unpopular.
And I also appreciate her emphasis on, recognizing that people might be articulating their opinions for the first time and their initial phrasing might not fully capture their intended meaning.
It's true, sometimes we need a little help expressing ourselves clearly, especially when we're exploring new ideas or grappling with complex issues.
Right.
And so she suggests offering people the opportunity to rephrase or refine their thoughts and thanking them for raising important points, even if those points are unpopular or challenging.
It's about encouraging a sense of agency and rewarding people for engaging in the conversation, even when it's difficult.
Exactly.
And what about when someone does say something that's clearly inappropriate or offensive? How do you address that without shutting down the entire conversation?
Well, Sidlovskaya encourages approaching those comments with the benefit of the doubt and seeking clarification. Instead of immediately getting defensive or jumping to conclusions, try asking questions like, "Can you tell me more about what you're thinking?" Or, "What underlying assumptions are you making here?"
Oh, those are great questions. They invite the person to elaborate on their thoughts, and they help you understand their perspective better.
Exactly. It's about trying to get to the root of the issue rather than just reacting to the surface level comment.
Right.
She also reminds us to be mindful of cultural differences and language barriers, which can sometimes lead to misunderstandings or unintentional offense.
That's a really important point. We need to be sensitive to the diverse backgrounds and experiences of the people we're communicating with and recognize that not everyone communicates in the same way.
Right. It's about being respectful of those differences and approaching the conversation with cultural sensitivity.
Yeah.
I thought her anecdote about the international student's question on racism was particularly insightful. It illustrates how respectful probing and reframing can lead to impactful learning moments, even when the initial question or comment is potentially problematic.
Yeah, I remember that anecdote. It's a great example of how approaching a challenging situation with curiosity and a genuine desire to understand rather than resorting to judgment or dismissal can lead to a really positive outcome.
It really highlights the power of empathy and active listening in these difficult conversations.
Yeah.
And Sidlovskaya emphasizes that the goal isn't always agreement. Sometimes just gaining a deeper understanding of different perspectives and broadening our thinking is enough.
That's so true. It's not about trying to, win the argument or convert everyone to our way of thinking.
Exactly. It's about engaging in a thoughtful exchange of ideas and perspectives, even when those perspectives differ from our own.
Expanding our horizons and challenging ourselves to think critically about complex issues.
You got it. Sedlovskaya concludes by reminding us that leading these types of discussions takes practice, and we don't have to do it perfectly. The important thing is to keep doing it, to keep engaging with these difficult conversations, and to model that willingness to learn and grow alongside others.
I love that. It's about embracing the journey, knowing that we'll make mistakes along the way, but that the effort is worth it.
It is. This whole collection is really about creating spaces where open and respectful dialogue can flourish, even, or perhaps especially when the topic is challenging.
Right. And, we've covered a lot of ground today exploring all these different facets of navigating challenging conversations, from setting the stage to embracing respectful discord, from tackling morally charged topics to bringing politics into the classroom, and finally to leading those difficult discussions with grace and skill. What stands out to you from all of this?
It's amazing how many practical strategies there are for handling these conversations.
Yeah.
And how they can be applied in so many different areas of life. We've explored how to build trust, encourage vulnerability, use language thoughtfully, and approach challenging moments with curiosity rather than judgment.
Right. Those are all such valuable skills to have, not just in educational settings, but in workplaces, community organizations, and even in our personal relationships. So before we wrap up this deep dive, let's take a moment to reflect. How might you apply these insights and strategies in your own life? Whether you're leading a team meeting at work, navigating a tricky conversation with a family member, or even just trying to have a productive discussion online, these principles can make a real difference. It's not always about reaching complete agreement, but about fostering that deeper understanding, broadening our perspectives, and being willing to engage with the complexity of things.
Absolutely. It's about recognizing that disagreement and debate can actually be valuable as long as they're conducted with respect and a genuine desire to learn from each other.
Well, that's it for our deep dive into navigating challenging conversations. We hope you found these insights valuable and that they inspire you to create more space for open and respectful dialogue in your own life.
Thanks for joining us. We hope you found it insightful. If you want to dig deeper into the research yourself, we'll include a link to the full paper in the show notes.
And if you enjoyed this episode of Revise and Resubmit, be sure to subscribe to our channel on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. We'll be back soon with another deep dive into the latest academic research.